At alert level 4, the aim is to eliminate contact with each other, and that is what a full lockdown achieves. At level 3, restrict, there is still a high risk the virus can get out of control and bounce back, as we've seen in countries overseas. So the goal remains to restrict contact with one another as much as possible. That is why I recently described level 3 as the waiting room, or something like a recovery room. We have to wait and see if what we have done has worked. After a while, if we don't show further signs of illness, we can go back to a life that is a bit more normal, which is what alert level 2 really starts to feel like. If we deteriorate, then it's back to lockdown at level 4. And just like when you're recovering from an illness, you still primarily stay home. And that's the same message at level 3. Stay home, save lives. It remains the most effective way to break the chain of transmission. There are some key differences though, based on assessments of public health risk and evidence from overseas, aimed to help people and business to move forward while we are still in the recovery room. Firstly, keep your bubble. The more we can limit the new people everyone is exposed to, the better. But at level 3, you can expand your bubble a small amount. If you have a caregiver that you need in your life, children who might be in a shared care arrangement, a de facto partner who is caring for others, or you're a single person who wants the company of a sibling, for example, you can extend your bubble. Keep it exclusive though, keep it small. Secondly, the principle for businesses and workplaces at level 3 moves from essential operations only to safe operations only. We still want to reduce contact with one another, so you must work from home if you can. If you cannot, because you work in an area like forestry or construction, you can return to your place of work if you apply the health and safety expectations we have established for COVID-19, in the same way that businesses currently operating have. That includes things like social distancing and good hygiene practices. The same applies for those who work in people's homes, like furniture removal, electricians or plumbers. You can return to work, but keep your distance from your customers. There are, however, some businesses that cannot open in their usual way because it involves far too much contact on too large a scale with members of the public. Public-facing bars, restaurants and cafes remain closed, and so do malls and retail stores. But, unlike level 4, food delivery, drive-through, online shopping, or options like click and collect shopping can begin. The key principle here is simple. You cannot engage in face-to-face transactions, so use your phone, use your computer, use your car, or use an app. There is a high level of responsibility that comes with reopening many businesses in this way, and it isn't without risk. We've consulted with major sectors like hospitality and retail on these changes, and we are working with other sectors on industry-specific guidelines to minimise risk. But at level 3, we cautiously start opening up our economy, albeit with significant mitigations. I know there'll be another number of questions around other businesses that you'll have. I can assure you that in the more detailed guidance that is available, some of those questions will certainly be answered. Thirdly, at level 3, there will be a partial reopening of education. Early childhood centres and schools will be available up to and including Year 10 only, but attendance is purely voluntary. Our intention here is to create a place for children to go to learn if their parents need to return to work, but to do so safely. Children will be kept in their own school bubbles, small groups to try and limit their exposure to too many other children each day. For children who are able to, we still encourage them to remain home and be part of distance learning. Tertiary education will mostly be through distance learning, but with the exception of on-campus research that can't be done off-campus, such as lab work and practical hands-on learning, such as trade courses, where the learning can happen in small groups with appropriate physical distancing. Courses where close contact is unavoidable will remain online only. Travel restrictions remain. Previously, we have talked about keeping it local. At level 3, we will ask that you keep it regional. The principle here is that we know at level 3 more people will travel to work or to take children to school. We don't, however, want to take potential COVID cases into other parts of the country. So restricting movement to only what is necessary is still the goal here. When it comes to recreation, the principles also remain simple. Keep it alone or in your bubble, keep it low risk, and also keep it non-motorised. That means we are still excluding things like boating and jet skis. It's simply because we know from the statistics these are still prone to accidents or breakdowns that can lead you to have contact with others. But there are other activities which you can undertake by yourself or within your bubble that we will be permitting. You can swim, you can surf, you can fish from the shore. However, I do want to add a word of caution here. Now is not the time to take up a new activity that you have never done before. It is too risky. The whole point at this level is to continue to really reduce down, as I've said before, your contact with others. If there is any sign of congregation, we will not hesitate to review these changes. So please, do not rush to places where others may congregate as well and treat it as a reunion with your long-lost swimming buddies. At level 3, the principle of reducing contacts remains, so that means tough calls still on life events. Funerals will be able to go ahead, but they will not be able to have any more than 10 people. That includes for tangi as well. For weddings, the same number applies, but they can only be services. No meals, food, or receptions can take place. We're simply suggesting here that for those who wish to take part in a legal ceremony, they are able to. Sadly, level 3 is about reducing risks, and as you will have seen from some of our devastating clusters, life events means a major risk and only require one person to be carrying the illness to spread it to dozens of others. Finally, you'll see from the description of level 3, there are more opportunities for you to come into contact with people outside your bubble. As a general rule of thumb, the goal of keeping 2 metres away from each other still applies. That's the gold standard. And for anyone who's ever wondered why, that's the distance you need from someone who may potentially be symptomatic if you are to remain away any potentially dangerous things like sneezes, droplets, coughs, and so on. However, in some places that will be more difficult. If you are in a workplace or an education facility, for instance, places, however, where we will be able to contact trace the people around you, then in these circumstances, 1 metre can apply. That's in keeping with the World Health Organisation's recommendations of distance for someone who does not have symptoms. So again, if it's people you know and that we can find if we need to, then 1 metre is a rule that we can apply in those circumstances. Fundamentally though, the more distance, the better, particularly when it comes to strangers. In fact, now more than ever, as you come into contact with more people, we must keep our distance, wash our hands, keep yourself and your bubble safe, continue to act like you have COVID, and I would add to act like those around you and near you may have it too. Keep a note of where you have been, when you have been there, and who with. It will help if we ever find ourselves contacting you because of a potential COVID case. Small changes like this will make the world of difference. There is extra risk and a high level of trust and responsibility that comes at level 3 if and when we move to it. The success of our lockdown and the majority of people showing they can follow the rules gives me confidence, but the same level of discipline to keeping to the rules at level 3 continues to apply, if not more. There will no doubt be additional questions beyond the broad overview I've given today, and as I've said, Details are available at the COVID website. It includes much more of a description around some of what I've talked about. Does not mean we'll necessarily be able to provide every answer to every single scenario. We have given ourselves time though, so if you're a business in particular and you need a question answered, please do reach out to MB for further information. All workplaces though should begin to work on a plan for how they are managing risks and protecting workers and customers under COVID Alert Level 3. And these need to be made available at a work site so staff can see what steps you as an employer are taking. We'll also be providing support for businesses to do this through a self-accreditation scheme of sorts available online. And I'll say more about that next week. Ultimately, Level 3 is a progression. It's not a rush to normality. Many things will feel the same as they do now. It is not until Level 2 that there is significantly lower risk to public health and where there can be a significant loosening of controls on people's movement and your ability to socialise with one another. But there is a reason for that. We want to get to that place sooner. And when we get there, we want to stay there. In fact, Treasury modelling tells us that we are better off in the longer term to stay in levels 4 and 3 a bit longer now and defeat the virus rather than moving too quickly and having to move backwards and forwards between the levels or stay in them longer overall. We have the opportunity to do something no other country has achieved, elimination of the virus, but it will continue to need a team of 5 million behind it. Under a lockdown, we've shown our ability to put in place a virtual wall that is breaking the chain of transmission. Our new line of defence when we reach Level 3 is common sense, following the rules and trusting one another, and I believe we can do that.